So here's a quick little video on how I got the ball off this plug and play of these plug and play things. This is another unit that I'm going to use to demonstrate because I'll use it for something else, another build at some point. But basically, if you try to, the ball doesn't screw off on its own. You can I did a whole bunch of things when I was trying to get the ball off. I originally put it like in a table clamp, a big old huge iron table clamp, and even then it still didn't want to come off. It's like on there with the molding of the plastic somehow. So basically, and it works out easier with design. Even if I would have gotten the ball off, I would have still had to cut about an inch off the shaft anyway. So I mean, the best idea is to just cut the shaft in the right place so the steering wheel ends up in the right place, which is right around here at the bottom. Right at the bottom of the ball is where you want to cut. There's a little, see that little red mark that I put on there? That's about where you want to cut. This little silver thing is actually just a plastic sleeve that slips over an actual metal piece that's, I think, 5/8. I'm going to actually have to check the width on that to get the wood ball right for the steering wheel, which is another reason why I'm taking this apart. I need to get that control panel dimension exactly right and be able to fit the wheel and the control panel, make sure it fits right. But anyway, here's the cut point right here, just below the joystick right there. And so usually what I did the last time was I started it with a Dremel tool to just kind of go in and notch a little bit. You're gonna have trouble with the shaft hitting the ball here, so I just notched it just a little bit so I get a starter point, and then I use a hacksaw. I just actually power through the damn thing with a hacksaw. And the way to do that is, I think I put it in a vise. I think I put this plastic case part in a vise before. And then I just grab the saw and then bang, cut the friggin' ball off and hold the ball actually as a grip while you're doing it. So this part is in the clamp and you're hanging onto the ball with your hands and then carefully cutting off that way. It's a pretty hardened piece of steel in there, so it's kind of like a little bit of a labor. You may have to take a little break and come back to it if your arm gets tired. But once it's off there, the shaft is going to be exactly the perfect length that it needs to be for the wheel mount that I came up with. So I'll be back when that's done right now. So as you can see, I've got this partially cut away already. I've got the starter thing done with the Dremel, and I've hacksawed into it a little bit. And I'm basically just holding onto this thing. I've got a little 2x4 piece under here to kind of support it while I'm running the saw across it. And as long as you're holding this ball steady, you've got enough stability there to run the saw across it. So I'll be back when I have the cut made all the way through. So, okay, here we go with the ball cut off now, finally. It's a little bit laborious, but I mean, once you get it down to a little bit over halfway, you can actually use the Dremel to finish off from the other side, so it's not that bad. So you can see that it's a steel core, and you can just pull that little sleeve right off of there, and that can just go away. So now, you've got your unit here. These are not even real screws here, by the way. They're just dummy plastic screws molded into the case. The thing is actually screwed in from underneath, and that's how it's going to screw into the new control panel underneath, and it's going to basically hide these dummy screws. These old leaf switch, arcade style leaf switch buttons are going to go away for smaller, newer ones where the leaf switch is hidden inside, because you'll see once you take this thing apart, the mechanics of these things are like jumbo and they take up a lot of space in there that's not needed. And anyway, that's how you get it off of there. Now you're left with the perfect length to have like half a ball on there for your joystick. So I'll figure out what the diameter of this is. I think it's a little bit bigger than 3/16. It might be a straight up, it looks like a straight up 1/4 of an inch, but I need to be sure of that. What I'm going to do next real quick is put the threads on here real quick with the Dremel, so you can see that, because that's a necessary step in putting the wood ball on there for the steering wheel. So I'm going to basically use this cutting tool, and I'm going to go along here kind of at an angle, and I'm going to reduce little threads in here, little ridges into the steel, kind of like a threading pattern, but not an actual threading pattern. If you wanted to, you could put a real thread pattern on here with like a tap and die kit, but you know, I didn't want to go and buy like a $40 tap and die kit just to do the one stupid project when I can pull it off with this. After that, there's one more thing that needs to be done when the wheel's on there that I'll come back and show you a little later. Hang on. Okay, so now you can see where I've gone in with the Dremel here and basically ran it across at an angle on the steel here to create kind of like a faux threading pattern that's at an angle. It doesn't have to be perfect. The purpose of it is so it'll grab a hold of the wood, you know. Once you put epoxy in the hole of that wood, the epoxy will kind of soak into the wood a little bit and expand the grain of the wood. At the same time, it'll go down in between the ridges that you've created and the threads, and it'll act to and it'll dry in there like a hard plastic, so it'll act as a thing to keep the wheel stable. There's one more mod that's pretty important that happens after you get the ball on there, which is we're going to flatten the top of this out, and then what we're going to do once the ball is on there is go across the Dremel, and we're going to make one single trench across here, a very narrow trench that's just the width of this cutting wheel once the ball's on there again, and then we're going to cut across the wood of the ball and the steel with a very thin trench so we can drop a little piece of hardened steel in there that I'm going to give you. And what that's going to do, once the epoxy dries on that, it'll lay flat, the whole ball will be flat, the steel will be flat, but there'll be a little piece of steel down in that trench, flat steel that I'm going to give you, and then that'll help to hold the ball in place once the wheel's on there, and it'll give a nice stable base, because once you get the ball off there, you can see the tension on this thing is massive. I mean, it's a good design joystick, but you gotta have that ball stable on there. You know, I was originally thinking about trying to drill through this thing and run a screw through it, but this trench across the top thing has worked very well. I haven't had any problems with my wheel. When you're playing, you don't want to try to force the wheel any further than it can go, or you may snap it or whatever, but it still shouldn't move theoretically once the trench is in there. But I'll get a ball cut out and show you that process so you're clear on that, because it's pretty important to have that wheel stay in place. Okay, so got the ball cut out, and as you can see here, I got it a really tight fit. It's actually a metric size 15/16, which is just under 1/4 of an inch. But with cutting it out at that size, it screws on there really tight. So you can see it's pretty much strong enough. This is with no glue or anything. Let's see where it comes up on the side like that. The wheel's going to be just a little bit of an angle, but no big deal. That'll actually help you orient north. But you can see it has just enough distance, and the control panel is going to come up and give it just about 1/4 of an inch, and it'll have a good look. The wheel won't be sitting too high up off the board. It's just right. So that's the length that you want. Now what I'm going to do, Glenn, is take my broken my cutting blade here, and obviously I'm going to cut right here where the line is, a little thin trench through the steel, through the wood, and then we're going to I'm going to show you a little piece of steel that we drop in there, and that helps stabilize the wheel. So the wheel that the ball's going to have the 4 pre-cut holes, and the wheel's it's going to match the dimension of the wheel. I'll even give you this little extra one that I cut in half. So I'll drill, once I drill the wheel out, and have the holes lined up, I'll give you this as a spare just in case this cracks in half or anything. These are very hardwood balls that I use, so I mean they're extremely tough. They're not gonna do anything. This one right here is gonna work fine, but I'll give you this extra one drilled out with the same pattern just in case you ever need to replace it someday or something. But this is actually a really nice tight hold that I was able to achieve on that, and you basically just put the ball down there, screw it on. You'll be able to see which side is up just by like the screw pattern of the holes, you know. These two down here will be a little bit narrower than these up here, so you can orient north, because it's important you have this set up straight north so your wheel will be, you know, in the right center. Also, once I take this apart, I'm going to take this apart in a second. You want to mark your joystick on the bottom which side is up before you install it. That way it won't have it actually pointing down. I have this down, but the wheel will be on the other side when I'm just going to do the trench in it anyway, just to show you, because it's just an example. But you want to have your wheel pointed up and your orientation right on that, obviously. But let me cut the trench. I'll be right back. All right, so here we go with the trench cut out in the steel, so you can see exactly what it looks like. It's not hard at all once the wheel's on there. I've got the wheel oriented in a straight up position now, so that's the way you're going to want it. This is the actual wheel that I'm going to give you. I just haven't drilled out the holes for the wheel yet, but this video is just to show you how this process works. When you get it out, you get the wheel on, the hole pattern's already there. The wheel will screw on right on top of this, and you won't be able to see any of this. But anyway, yeah. After this, you just drip a little epoxy in there, and then here's this little piece of steel that you're going to put in there. And what it is actually is, I just take old saw blades, old scroll saw blades, and I take them and I put them on the grinder, and I basically just grinded the teeth off of them. So it gives you a little thin piece of steel, rectangular piece of steel. Instead of a piece of round rod, you have a little flat piece of steel that pretty much matches that trench that's the width of the blade. You want it to be pretty close, you know, or at least as close as you can get it. Then this just slips down in there. You've already got a little epoxy in there when you're putting this together. And then see how it just, boom, slips right in there nice and clean. Okay, so I'm going to give you like 3 or 4 little pieces of this steel already cut out at this length and everything. And see, when the epoxy dries, you can see how it's going to just like, this steel is really tough. It's like piano wire practically. It's pretty hard to bend. And so with this short of a distance hanging out the side of each edge, there's just no way that wheel's going to bend. Even saying that, you know, knock on wood, you know, because the wheel's going to go down on top of that, and it's just no way it's ever going to move. So you want to be sure you've got that right. But there it is, man, and you can have a really successful wheel after that. All you got to do is put the wheel on with the little brass screws that I'm going to give you, and then bang. And then I'll continue with another little video on putting the control panel in. I gotta just take this thing apart, work out the square for the control panel that screws in, but we're almost there, man.